My name is Jens Geyer. I have been studying the history of World War II for several years. Today I would like to introduce you to a part of the history of a giant German project in the Al Mountains, in Lower Silesia, Poland. The first interview is taken with David Halivny. David Halivny, born in 1927 in Kobyleżka Poliana, Czechoslovakia, now Ukraine. Inmate of labor camp Wolfsberg.
When I was in Wolfsberg, I took upon myself mostly 2 transports from Sighet to keep also a memory to who died, so that I could afterwards be a witness for the wife. But after the war, it turned out that women fared worse, because with children, Mengele sent them straight. He did not check whether they're able to work or not. So I, to this day, know who was the first victim. But he didn't, of course, survive, and neither did his wife survive.
What did you do in the camp?
Well, depends. That I think that it was very, very crucial to the survival. I was interested purely in survival.
Mm-hmm.
So much so, I think I mentioned in the book, in the memoirs, but it's worth mentioning again. There was, in my neighborhood in Sighet, there was another family by the name of Dupe. Their son, they had a son on my age, a little older a year, who went to the gymnasium, who went to school, who did exercise at school, and so who was robust and so on. I was pale. What did they expect? I sat all day long in the synagogue, the smeders, closed doors, closed windows. I remember when we came to Wolfsberg, he was sitting there and we went to work. He was with muscles, so to speak, at the beginning, was shoveling, and and he looks at me, and I couldn't resist and said, "What will happen?"
You said, "What will happen?"
No, he asked me.
Yeah.
He was robust,
Yeah.
and he was able to work, and he sometimes even gotten some extra piece for extra or bread for work. My policy was not to work, not to strain myself,
To do the minimal to make sure you survive.
Yeah, just when the SS looked, my shovel moved. He said, as if to say with Rahmanes, with pity, how would you survive like this? Well, sometimes later, we were already in Ebensee, which is the other planet. His father was with him. You can never forget that. One day, the father tells me, we were standing near each other. Look at Oscar was his name. He was already what we called a Muslim. You don't know that expression. A Muslim, I don't know exactly what the etymology is, was someone who you know will die within 24 hours. Malnutrition. Then the father told me, he was our neighbor. Those were his words. You will survive. It was the second time he told. You will survive. See what happened to Ossi. You'll come home, tell my cousin, he named him, what happened to him. And exactly next morning, Ossi was already dead.
Because he had exerted himself so much that he was so weak?
I think the exertion without nutrition and other things, health things, he didn't make it.
What was the nature of the work? What was going on in the camp? What was
the different camps had different work, more difficult. I worked with a shovel. We dug. The work was usually, at least in my case, the Germans built tunnels they dig tunnels to build munition factories against bombing.
I see. To do the work so they would not be destroyed.
We would. Well, I describe it in detail. If you want the details, yes. It's important. We went in the particular place and made a hole, dig a hole, and then the hole was dynamited. And then we came again, the Jews, the workers, came with a chiller, with a wagon, and took out the debris, whatever it is. So there was room, and then we went further, and so we weren't allowed to use the dynamite. In my case, in Wolfsberg, it was Italian soldiers, war prisoners, who did the bombing. I have a whole story you read about the Blattel and so.
Well, I want to come back. I want to come to that. I think that's an interesting story. But,
yes.
But I wanted to ask you, in general, did you continue to study Talmud or practice religion?
I couldn't. There were not.
But I remember that you remember.
After I mentioned that, after I was settled down, so to speak.
Yes.
I had those that made the holes. And I had, so to speak, a fixed job. On the way, I could begin thinking. Till then, my job was to look at the SS and that it doesn't catch me not working. And when we came to camp, we had to make sure we had have a place to sleep, that everything is there. So I had no time to learn.
Did you have any kind of, were you able to continue any kind of religious practice in the camp?
Religious?
Yes. Did you mark the Shabbat? Did you
we
mark any of the high
know
holidays?
it's Shabbat. The religious, the problem was Pesach. Problem was Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. You know about the davening, the blattel.
Yes.
I know about the davening that they allowed us kol nidre.
They allowed you kol nidre.
Yes, but otherwise we were working. So there was almost none.
Tell me the story about the blood. I know it's in your book, but I think I'd like to record the story.
Well, I'd like to record the story. There was start from the very beginning. Technically, we had off every second Sunday. But they did not really realize it. The SS always find an excuse. Supposedly, we are volunteering. But nevertheless, it happened a few hours, where we could sit and do nothing. The SS didn't bother us. So there was the people that worked. It was called Ackerman, who do the drilling, and they had a couple who was also the name of Weiss. And when we were sitting, that Sunday, that was supposedly free Sunday, he was I said, and we talked, I remembered what we learned, the Tractate of Shabbat, because the people knew it from the book, from the prayer book and so on. And I was sort of a leader. He saw that and sort of decided that he'll take me in his company. Ackerman, who was doing that, it was a very difficult company. And therefore, while the others worked 12 hours and they worked only 10. And occasionally, sometimes they even got cigarettes from the company. So when I got cigarettes, I sold it for bread. So the idea was, why would they take me to a company which works is more difficult than others? Because those drillers, that made the hole, had to be sharpened. And they didn't want that to be bring to a fire, to a schmidder, to a smith. They didn't want to do it in the tunnel itself, fire. So it was outside. So somebody had to bring those drillers to the smith, sharpen and bring it back 2 or 3 times or more times during a night, let's say. So and they usually chose the youngest, I was the youngest, to do that work. That made it was much easier, and the person also got the benefits because the company did not the list. So he took me into that, in his company, and I had those privileges. So at night, when we worked at night, I used to do 4 or 5 times going through from the place of work inside the hotel, pending every day they got larger and larger, to the outside where they were sharpened and bring it back and so on. That's why I said before, I walked with this. I had to be very careful because when the other people took out the stones, with the dynamite exploded, they had a little chila, they call it, a little car. So. And there was hardly any room for a car or for a human being. There were cases where people were sketched. So on the way, there was, in a crossroad, there was a German. It was not a German, it was a Tod. That means, Tod meant one Volksdeutsch. But then Deutsch was really his mother tongue. You could recognize. If he was a Volksdeutsch from Poland, if he spoke German, it was a Polish accent. So
he was
we
a Pole.
know. What?
He was Polish.
But he was German. I was born in Poland.
I see, okay.
But Volksdeutsch,
Yes.
it's called. And I used to meet him, of course of night, I met him a few times. I had to lift up my mitzvah, my head, the procedure. One night, I walked, and then I'm beginning to, I even discussed, I remember what I was thinking about. I described that too. Some interesting, not halachic, Talmudic question. Mixture. And I saw him, they used to eat in between and the night too. But I saw him, he had his food is wrapped in a page of Shulchan Aruch. I remember Hilchot Pesach, the laws of Pesach, and I remember even the particular law, whether you could do it through an agent. I cannot, and I felt his feet. And I asked him to give me the blood. It was saturated from fat. But He took out the revolver, but I was sort of convinced. And he gave it to me. And I brought it to camp. But then, as I said, there was a danger. If the Germans, you couldn't carry anything contraband on them. So a Jew by the name of Heinz Finkelstein, I think he was from Mattersalka, that's a particular community. He carried it on his body. When we came back to camp first, we used to, if there's a free Sunday, we could use it. But a month later, when we went to Amesay, you know, the end, and there it was totally different. There was a Vernichtungslager, extermination camp. And I saw him from a distance, and I asked him, motioned him, what's happened? And he knocked on the, I know it means he has it. And then I was told 2 or 3 hours later, he collapsed, and he was taken to the Sreifa, and he was burned together with the blood.
He was in the crematorium.
What?
I'm sorry, he was, I didn't hear what you said.
He was, I was told.
Yes.
He collapsed, and then they took him to the crematorium.
To the crematorium.
And they burned them.
And with the blood off.
With the blood.
Mm.
And which I use tells you, I call a Musaraske. The blattel, the Torah, has value only if there's a Mr. Finkelstein. No Mr. Finkelstein, no blattel.
You know, one thing that was interesting was that I was curious about from your memoir is that a number of the capos seemed to be interested in you, and
a member?
The capos.
Capos, yes.
Yes, they were. They seemed interested in you, and
that's I can't explain that. And there is just a minute, and there is a story. I don't know. Which I don't mention that I didn't know, and I think I will use this opportunity to mention. I one day, already still in Wolfsberg, one day, rumor had it that they taking kids, I mean, my age, to peel potatoes. You don't know what that meant. First, it meant warm. Usually you're in the kitchen, you peel potatoes. Secondly, you have food. It's raw. You could throw it in the yida, you could throw it in the oven. It was one of the most desired jobs. So I I joined them. I went in and sat down where they were supposed to meet. The assistant, the vice director, the short fellow, he had asthma. You could imagine if he had that position in camp, he was not a bird. He was not. He was known for a certain ruthlessness. He took me out. The second time I went, I smuggled him again, because I didn't think I ever met him, ever knew him. I met him, of course, I saw him every day, but not a kind face-to-face kind of meeting. And he took me out the second time. So I saw it's useless. Then it turned out that they weren't taken to peel potatoes, they were to be killed. No, I didn't write in the memoir because I didn't know, and I don't know today either what. Why? Why would this man, who was basically cruel and inconsiderate, why would he take out? Why did he even know me?
Mm-hmm.
The only explanation I have is that the one who, they only took somebody to take care of their needs, household needs, other needs, took care of his house and cooked and so on, was from Sighet. And he even, I think, even told me that he once pointed me out to him, told him I was a Nilui.
I'm sorry, this was a person who worked for him and was also from Sighet.
Yeah, no, one of the refugees.
Yes, okay.
This couple had a room, a house.
I see.
So this fellow from Sighet took care of his needs.
I see.
He told me, I think, that he once pointed at me that I'm a Nilui.
I see.
I know, that.
So he saved you.
He may have, could it be, I can't believe it to this, could it be that this man, despite his, still didn't want that Anilui, that the learning of Talmud should continue. It's staggering.
Did he tell you why he was taking you
No.
out? He just said, go
Oh,
away.
he doesn't talk to me. He never said that.
He just said, go away.
There was another one that I mentioned, by the name of Levkovich, who told me he was a couple, who was once a Gerachoset, he said, that used to ask me to quote him erotic sections from the Talmud.
Erotic.
Erotic, I
Yes.
said erotic,
Yes.
erotic, yeah. And he gave me a piece of bread or something. That I understand.
The second interview is taken with Fred Schwartz. Fred Schwartz, born on October 30, 1928 in Kataj, Hungary, inmate of Laborcamp Wolfsberg.
In Silesia, they took us to a camp. It's called Wolfsberg. When we arrived, we found 20 Jewish inmates from Poland. One became a Lagerälteste, and a couple of them became capos, And to tell you the truth, they were very rough on us. Why? Because they were Polish Jews. And they yelled at us, we suffering already 4 years while you were staying home and eating the good stuff and all these things. And they put together not regular barracks, but in a real emergency, it was like heavy cardboard, round like shacks, and we were sleeping on wood, one near the other, but 25 in a shack like this. And when it came October or November, I don't know exactly the month, and we saw that they're starting to build regular barracks from wood, we know that we have to be prepared to stay there wintertime. I worked night shift in tunnels. We made tunnels because there were big mountains, and the mountains consisted inside of stones. and we made tunnels over there because that's where they were hiding machineries. Matter of fact, the tunnel that we were built, they told us openly that there was a big machinery factory in Budapest, and they bring machineries from there. Plus, the German soldiers, when they knew that the Russians are coming, I mean 1944, they knew that the war is lost for them, but they wanted to kill as many Jews as possible in a hurry. And they wanted to hide over there in the tunnels, and when the Russians come, to use all kind of heavy artillery to shoot from the tunnels. Matter of fact, my job, you see, I was still not 16 years old, so they had pity on me, the capos, and I was driving the locomotive, because they were little wagons that carried the stone from the tunnel out. And I was driving the locomotive. It was very simple one, you know, so you didn't have to learn how to. And we carried the stones, we dumped it, and went back for more stones. And one day I went back to the camp in the morning, and I found out the bad news. My brother got hurt because he wanted to put together two wagons, not with the train that I was driving, somebody else was driving it, and he didn't realize it, and the two trains, the one is they filled up with stones, the two bumpers catched his leg. And that was bad news, and I tell you why. Because any little thing happened to a person, like got very bad injury on the hand or on the leg, but they didn't play too much, they amputate. And the next day, I came back to the camp from work, and that was the news where they told me that your brother's leg, I don't remember, I think it was the right leg, was amputated. But still, he was in hospital. I went to visit him every day. He never told me. That's something I never gonna forget. He never told me what happened to him. He never showed me that his leg was amputated. Never told me. I knew. I didn't talk about it, and he didn't talk about it. And that went on for 4 weeks. But then the Russian came every day closer and closer to the camp, and the camp had to be liquidated. And they took away all the people from the hospital. Came wagons, trucks, horses and carriages, and all the people from the hospital was taken away. And it was like a district in that neighborhood which had a crematorium, because by us in the camp there was no crematorium. And they took them away, all of them, from the hospital, and they got killed in the crematorium. And after they left, a couple days later, we started to march from the camp. The camp has to be empty. Matter of fact, sometimes we can hear with our ears the noise from the fighting, the Russians and the Germans, you know, bombs or heavy artillery or something. We heard it, and we marched a full day, and we came again to a farm with a big barn. And that barn could take normally, I'm talking about standing, not am sitting or laying down. Standing, I would say about 2,000 people. The other 1,000 because we had 3,000. The other 1,000 was pushed in with the bayonet. You know, put it in to the stomach and pushed in. The noise, the crying, what went on all night, this was unbearable, because anybody who couldn't have no strength to stand fell down. People stepped on it. They opened the barn door 8 o'clock in the morning. That time we realized what kind of night it was, because they were carrying out from the barns dead people, stepped on the body and dead. Anybody couldn't, had no strength to stand. They were just dead and taken away.
The third interview is taken with Leo Schneiderman. He is born on August 18, 1921 in Lodz, Poland, inmate of Laborcamp Wolfsberg.
At one time, they asked, who ever worked in road construction? The minute I ran over, they said, I did. He said, where did you go? He said, outside of Lodz when they built the highway. I never saw any construction workers at all. So they put a few hundred together, and they put us on a site. So we were on the transport. All the rest started getting tattoos to stay in Auschwitz with the number. And we were put on a transport, and I went to a labor camp outside in Silesia, in a place called Kaltwasser. Kaltwasser was a labor camp under construction. It was a beautiful area. They were building new roads, in a small railroad, and that's where we worked. The conditions that time, it was very hard. We didn't have adequate clothes, and it's starting to get cold in the morning, especially when we stood to be counted, we were freezing. There were no beds in our barracks. They just put some straw on the floor, and that's how we slept, in our clothes. And the work was very hard. But we felt that we were chosen to live. It is not Auschwitz. So we consider ourselves the lucky ones that we got away from Auschwitz. We did not stay too long in that particular camp, because as work progressed, we were sent to a different camp called Lerchien. It was the same work, the continuation of the same work. And there we also worked at the same thing, but the living conditions were a little better. There were beds already, bunks, and we did receive warmer clothes. But fortunately, that work in that was finished in a very short time. And they decided, again, we send us to a different camp in a place called Wolfsberg. At that particular camp, I met some people, those officials, that knew my family from before the war. And I did get a better job. I worked in the hospital, in that hospital, in that camp. And my situation improved a little bit, and so did my physical condition improved. And there I stood until we could hear the Russian army already approaching. At night we had cannon sound, and we felt that any day we're going to be liberated. In the hospital I worked in a place called Wolfsberg, not Lerchen. Yeah. Well, people, if they had some minor accident or they got sick, they report to the doctor. They came in and the doctor prescribed how many days he can stay in that hospital, 3 days, 4 days. A lot of people try to just get in to be away, to get some kind of a rest and to be away from that hard work. They couldn't take it no more. And some legitimately got sick and they reported to the hospital. They didn't get any treatment for anything. They just laid there just to stay away from work. And after a few days, the doctor decided you are right now and you can go. If somebody got seriously sick, somebody made a report, and every few weeks they came and they took the German people, the Gestapo over there, and they took them away. They said they took them away to a real hospital where they can get better treatment. Actually, they were taken to Auschwitz, to the gas chambers. And for example, people who knew that they were seriously ill, they tried as much as they could to stay away from the hospital. Because the hospital, they know if they happen to be so unlucky, and this is the time where the Germans come, because they come every once in a while to check this hospital. And they could tell, they didn't care about those people who tried to get away from work for a day or so. Whoever was ill, they were taken away. And they said that they'd take them to a hospital to be cured, but this was the end of them. The end station actually was Auschwitz or any other extermination camp. My work in that hospital was to keep order. In the morning they come in, I had to count the people and to get them ready for inspection. And after it also the food, I also distribute the food for those people. In some cases, people who did not work received half of the normal rations. Not in that camp where I worked, but in other camps this was the case. For example, this was the case in that last camp where I was liberated later on. This was the case that non-working people received half of the rations from them. But in that camp where I worked in Wolfsberg, it was not too bad, but the only thing, 3-4 days was the maximum that a person was allowed to be sick. If there was a serious sickness for longer, they took him away.
The fourth interview is taken with Solomon Klug. Solomon Klug is born on July 9, 1923 in Krzepice, Poland, inmate of Laborcamp Wolfsberg.
Then they took us, they took us to Fünfteichen from Markstedt, there where they had the electric wire around, and all this, real. Then when the Russians started coming into Poland, closer, you see, because we were close to Poland, them camps, what I was. They took us from this camp, and that was, I remember it was in January. They picked out some people, so we didn't know what they picked for, because most of the time when they were picking for the gas chamber, you see, so everybody was afraid, but you didn't have no choice. You had to go when they say. So they took us down to the camp That's all I know is the name of the camp, Wolfsberg, you know.
Can you tell me how you got there?
Where? To the camp?
To the camp.
Oh, they took us in them cars where they transport animals, you know, cows and horses, you know, them closed up cars.
What was that trip
So
like?
the trip was miserable because we were going for 2 days on this train, and every morning when they stopped, they just took out dead. You were laying overnight. In the morning you got up, you realized you were laying on dead people. So they took them out, you know, and then they took us out of the train, and they marched us to this camp over there. So they took us. They stopped. When they took us in a place, so we thought we were going to the gas chamber. It was a disinfection place, the disinfectors, you know. You had to go under the water, you know, come up. So glad we came out alive again. We kept going, but everybody was afraid that's it, because we knew that they take you from one place to the other. That's most likely they take you to the gas chambers. So they took us to this camp over there. We went to Wolfsberg there. Yeah, in Wolfsberg, we didn't stay long either, and we didn't do much work over there. The same what we did there was mountains, you know, and there they were trying to make the bunkers for the planes there too, you see. So that's what we were doing, is digging, you know, for them planes there. And the same thing we did in Bar, the same, because see, it was going already to the end of the war, and that's all with them planes trying to hide them. You see that because they were bombing, the Americans came in, and they were day and night. They didn't know where to go, the Germans, you see. So that was going to the end.
What did you do? What did the prisoners do while they were bombing?
Oh, with the bombing, they went in the things. We had them to lay down in them, how do you call them?
Bunkers?
Not really bunkers. It was open top, it's just ditches, you know.
Trenches.
Trenches, right. So they made us all run out, but they knew where they were throwing the bombs, you see. They hardly ever hit the camp. Never hit the camp, because they knew where the camps are. So they were only hit, you see, like we went, the camp on them factories there wasn't too far away. They knocked them factories out, but it didn't touch it. Nothing in the things. That's all we seen is just lit up. The camp was lit up. You know, so they never touched them.